The Sherfy Peach Orchard, perhaps one of the most beautiful places on the Gettysburg battlefield. This small patch of orchard, nestled here along the Emmitsburg Road just south of Gettysburg, will see some of the most intense fighting at the battle on July 2nd, 1863. But why the peach orchard? Why this small plot of land? And is the man responsible for the fighting here, was he wrong? Or was there a little bit more to Dan Sickles' reasoning for moving his troops forward here to the peach orchard? Today on Forward Gettysburg, we're going to discuss this and more. So sit back, relax, grab yourself a drink, and enjoy the video. How's it going, everyone? Aaron Smith here for Forward Gettysburg, and thank you so much for joining me. As I said earlier, I am in the Sherfy Peach Orchard, and this is probably one of the more popular areas of the Gettysburg National Military Park. But why the Peach Orchard? Why are we here? I know I've discussed this at some length in some of my other videos, but this video is going to have a little bit more of a different twist on it. I'm actually going to share some of my personal feelings and actually kind of sympathize and empathize with Dan Sickles. Ugh. But anyway, the Peach Orchard, here we are. Situation, July 2nd, 1863. Dan Sickles' 3rd Corps, around 10,000 men. They have made their way up from Emmitsburg, and there's no doubt that on their way from Emmitsburg, they eyed this beautiful ridge line that kind of intersects the road, the Emmitsburg Road. For simplicity's sake, let's call it the Emmitsburg Road Ridge. And they're going to spot this ridge. And this ridge is going to kind of be between the two lines, between the north and the south here at Gettysburg. The south, of course, they're lining up on Seminary Ridge. The north, they're lining up on Cemetery Ridge. So this peach orchard is kind of going to be in between the two lines. Now, Dan Sickles is oh, Dan Sickles is Dan Sickles. I think one of the more appropriate analogies you could make is that Dan Sickles was the Donald Trump-esque figure of the 1800s. Dan Sickles is famous for murdering his wife's lover, the son of Francis Scott Key, writer of the national anthem. He is going to murder Philip Barton Key. Dan Sickles is going to go to trial. And he has an all-star lawyer team led by none other than Edward Stanton, future Secretary of War for the United States under Lincoln. And he is going to be found not guilty by way of temporary insanity, the first successful temporary insanity plea in the United States legal history. Dan Sickles also is going to introduce a prostitute to the Queen of England. Dan Sickles is very involved with this prostitute, and we're about in the 1856-ish. The murder is going to be in 1858, and Dan Sickles has just skyrocketed the popularity. Dan Sickles is going to introduce a prostitute to the Queen of England, and he's going to introduce her under the name of one of his New York political rivals. So not only is Dan Sickles getting a jab at his political rival in New York, but he's also getting a jab at the Queen of England and the monarchy, because Dan Sickles hates England. He loves America. USA, USA. So he is just a fascinating individual. He's partly responsible for the founding of Central Park. He just does a lot. He's a lot. The murder trial is going to skyrocket him in fame. He is going to be on the front page of every paper. He is a full-blown celebrity in the United States at this point. Civil War starts. Dan Sickles, he is going to help raise a regiment, the 70th New York. He is eventually going to help raise a brigade, the Excelsior Brigade, and he's going to slowly start to rise up the ranks, eventually to the rank of Major General. At Gettysburg, he is Major General, Corps Commander of the 3rd Corps. So the 3rd Corps, they're going to make their way up from Emmitsburg. And as they come up, like I said earlier, they're going to spy this Emmetsburg Ridge. And no doubt the Emmetsburg Ridge is going to leave a lasting impression in the mind of Dan Sickles. But the Emmetsburg Ridge is not where Dan Sickles is supposed to take position. He wants, George Meade wants Sickles in the 3rd Corps to fall into the left of the 2nd Corps along Cemetery Ridge. Sickles' right flank should be resting on the left flank. That would have been Caldwell's division of the 2nd Corps. So Sickles is going to play along. He is trying to be a good soldier. He's going to take position there, and he's going to realize he is essentially in a hole. So right now, I'm on the portion of the Gettysburg National Military Park that runs between Little Round Top and the Pennsylvania Monument. Not a super visited part of the field. A lot of people just drive on through, but this is a part of the park that I like to call Sickles' Hole. And if you look behind me, you can kind of see, if I don't fall over, that this is certainly a hole, for lack of a better term. It's a relatively flat, even, you know, kind of de-elevated portion of ground here, and Sickles is not going to like that. Dan Sickles doesn't care for this position. Now, when Dan Sickles takes position out here on the Emmetsburg Road behind me, kind of stretching out in an arcing pattern, is going to be the remnants of Buford's cavalry, Devon's and Gamble's brigade. Now, these cavalrymen, they had put up quite a good fight on day 1, stalling the incoming Confederates from the west along the Chambersburg Pike. But they're tired, they're running low on supplies, they're running low on feed for their horses, they're running low on ammunition. So Meade is going to approve them to go back to Westminster, which was his main supply point here for the Gettysburg campaign. He's going to approve Buford's men to go back to Westminster to resupply and re-outfit their troops. Now, Dan Sickles is on the left flank, not necessarily hanging in air. His left flank is going to rest kind of in that Munshauer's Knoll, north slope of Little Round Top area. But Sickles isn't a huge fan of the position to begin with, and now all the skirmishers, the scouts, the feelers for the army that were in his front, they're gone. They're gone. So once they leave, the 3rd Corps, they're actually going to start inching up towards this position, towards the Emmetsburg Road, towards the peach orchard. So as they inch forward, Sickles is going to send forward 1 regiment of the U.S. sharpshooters under Colonel Hiram Berdan, and he's going to send forward the 3rd Maine Infantry, around 280 men. And they're going to move forward, they're going to move across the Emmetsburg Road, they're going to end up in Spangler's Woods. And what they're going to run into is going to be Wilcox's brigade of Alabamians. And the 10th and 11th Alabama, they're going to start to engage the 3rd Maine and the 1st United States Sharpshooter Regiment. And what's going to happen is the sharpshooters, they're going to be smart enough to take cover behind some trees and stuff, and they're not going to suffer an incredible amount of casualties. However, the 3rd Maine, they're kind of out in the open as they're firing, so they're going to take a little bit heavier casualties. They are going to report back to Sickles and say, hey, there is an enemy presence in your front. And this is going to get Sickles quite alarmed. And it's going to get Sickles alarmed because Sickles was at the Battle of Chancellorsville. Sickles kind of he recognizes that his 3rd Corps has been tossed out here on the left flank, and Meade and Sickles, they don't get along. So Sickles is going to feel kind of rebuffed by the general commanding of the Army of the Potomac. He's tossed out on the left flank, and at the time, they didn't really think anything was going to happen on the left flank. Meade was more focused on Culp's Hill and Cemetery Hill, because those 2 hills kind of straddled his supply line, the Baltimore Pike, which again went back to Westminster, Maryland, his main supply point for this campaign. The railroads terminated at Westminster and also went a little bit to the west to Union Bridge. So that's his supply line. That's where he's getting supplies for this campaign. So the Baltimore Pike is incredibly important to George Meade. Sickles, he feels left out. He feels like he's tossed out on this left flank. There's not going to be anything going on here. And Sickles recognizes that Hooker essentially did the same thing to the 11th Corps at the Battle of Chancellorsville. Sickles realizes that Hooker put the 11th Corps, which mostly comprised of German immigrants, put them out on the right flank at Chancellorsville, out of sight, out of mind. Y'all hang out over here, do your thing. And Jackson absolutely smashed and crushed that corps with a surprise flank attack. So Sickles, he feels that history is repeating itself just 2 months later. Also, at the Battle of Chancellorsville, the 3rd Corps under Sickles held a piece of ground called Hazel Grove, a somewhat elevated plateau, but an excellent artillery platform. Hooker, in his overabundance of caution during that battle, he's going to order Sickles to fall back from Hazel Grove. Of course, the Confederates, they are going to take Hazel Grove, and they are going to pound away at the Union Army using Hazel Grove as an artillery platform. So Sickles, with all these things in mind, he's going to send an aide to Meade. Meade is going to tell the aide, I am far too busy to deal with you, stay where you are at. Sickles is rebuffed. Sickles is probably feeling, as the kids say these days, some type of way. So Sickles is going to send for the Army Chief of Engineers to spot this position that he likes so much, the Peach Orchard, the Emmitsburg Road Ridge. He sends for Gouverneur K. Warren, the Army Chief of Engineers. Warren is going to rebuff him and say, no, Sickles, we're busy doing Army stuff. We're doing engineering stuff. We're engineering here. Stay where you're at. Sickles finally sends for Chief of Artillery Henry Hunt. And Henry Hunt is going to entertain Sickles. Henry Hunt is going to ride out here, spot the position with Sickles. He's going to say, this is not a bad position. Sickles is going to say, so then on your authority, for the authority of George Gordon Meade, do I have permission to move my troops forward here? Hunt says, Sickles, this is a good position, I'll give you that, but I cannot give you the authority to move forward. You need to act within the parameters of your orders. Well, Sickles, he figures acting within the parameters of his orders includes moving his men forward to the Emmitsburg Road Ridge. And by moving his troops forward, Sickles creates a whole host of issues for George Gordon Meade. Meade now is going to send Caldwell's division forward into the wheat field. He's going to send Sykes's 5th Corps, which was his Army Reserve. He's going to activate them and send them into battle. Now Meade has to wait for the 6th Corps, marching all the way from Manchester, Maryland, some 30 miles away. He's going to have to wait for them to arrive so that he has a reserve. So he causes a whole host of issues for George Gordon Meade. The rest is history. We all know the Confederates attack the 1st Corps under Longstreet and some elements of the 3rd Corps under A.P. Hill. They're going to attack this position. They're going to absolutely overrun the Union Army here at the Peach Orchard. There's going to be some fighting at the wheat field. There's going to be some intense fighting at Devil's Den. And this is going to be one of the bloodiest episodes in American history on the afternoon, early evening hours of July 2nd, 1863. So now it brings me to the premise of the video. Was Sickles really that wrong for moving forward? If you would ask Sickles himself, he would tell you that he saved the Union Army. You ask Meade, Meade would likely tell you that Sickles nearly destroyed the Union Army and the chances of victory here at Gettysburg. How can I possibly defend someone who blatantly disobeyed orders to remain connected to the 2nd Corps? How can I possibly defend someone who moved his entire corps, some 10,900 men, forward nearly 3/4 of a mile from their original ordered position? I think we need to use a little bit of empathy. I think we need to try to walk a mile in Dan Sickles' shoes. First off, Dan Sickles was an opportunist. Dan Sickles' favorite person in the world was Dan Sickles. He was going to do anything he could do to further his name in the press, in the eyes of the nation, and in his political career. What greater way than to blatantly disobey an order and cause such mayhem and then twist it around and make yourself out to be the hero. In fact, Dan Sickles is going to win the Medal of Honor. He's going to be awarded the Medal of Honor in the 1890s for his actions here at Gettysburg. So somebody somewhere thought that what he did was good enough of an idea to be awarded a Medal of Honor. So let's step into Dan Sickles' shoes here. You're ordered into a position. It's a miserable position. It's a hole. It is a low piece of ground in an otherwise Union line that was on the high ground. You're already not getting along with Meade. See, before Meade took command of the Army on June 28, 1863 from Joseph Hooker, there was kind of this rowdy frat boy triumvirate going on in the Army. You had the Army Chief of Staff, Daniel Butterfield. You had the Commander of the Army of the Potomac, Joseph Hooker, and you had Dan Sickles. And these three were notorious for hosting all kinds of parties and shenanigans, and it was said that their headquarters was more of a bordello than an Army headquarters. So you can kind of get the idea of what they had going on. They were hard drinking, they loved fast women, all this type of stuff. George Meade was a lifelong professional soldier. He was down to business. He was here to fight. And so you have these two different personalities that are going to clash, and Meade and Sickles never really got along. Meade looked down on Sickles because Sickles didn't have the West Point education that Meade felt was necessary for a corps commander in the Army of the Potomac. Sickles was a politically appointed general. Lincoln liked Sickles because Sickles was a Democrat. So if Lincoln could put these Democrats into these positions of power within the Army, then he would garner more Democratic support in the election and in the political arena. So Meade and Sickles, they don't get along. That's going to feed into this idea that Sickles has felt like he's left out to dry here on the left flank. So Sickles is feeling forgotten about. Sickles also, Chancellorsville was a huge factor in Sickles's decision making, in his logic for moving his troops forward. He didn't want another Hazel Grove. He didn't want another 11th Corps disaster, a flank attack. So when he sends the 3rd Maine and the 1st U.S. sharpshooters forward into those woods just across the Emmitsburg Road, and they discover that the enemy is moving in that area, Sickles' red flags, I mean, they are waving at full staff. He is on high alert. He does not want to end up like Oliver Otis Howard and the 11th Corps, the disgraced 11th Corps. He doesn't want a nickname like the Flying Dutchman. He is very concerned about this. Also, those cavalrymen, those early alert systems, you know, they didn't have radar or UAVs or anything, obviously, in the Civil War. So they would use cavalrymen as kind of an early warning system. Hey, the enemy's over here. Check this out. You know, all this kind of stuff. This is how big they are. This is what their forces look like. This is what they have, how many guns they have, etc., etc. So without that early warning system, Sickles is essentially left blind on the left flank. And I'm always confused about why Meade would take them away from the left flank. And it just goes back to that idea I put forward earlier that Meade isn't really worrying about his left flank here at Gettysburg on July 2nd. He's more worried about Culp's Hill and Cemetery Hill. Those two big, eminent, prominent geographical features kind of on the north side of the battlefield here at Gettysburg. So Meade is kind of being neglectful of the left flank here and has left Sickles, a man with no West Point experience, to kind of take care of things over here. We're in Dan Sickles' shoes. Maybe he's wearing cowboy boots, probably not. But we're in Dan Sickles' shoes. We have all these things going on. When we look at the totality of the circumstances here on July 2nd, 1863, on the left flank, we see that Dan Sickles certainly had some merit to his decision making. Yes, he disobeyed orders. That is a huge, huge no-no. That is absolutely unthinkable in a military organization. Those orders were given for a reason. Sickles disobeys that. Without Sickles moving forward, there's no wheat field. There's no devil's den. There's no peach orchard. There's likely not even a little round top. But Sickles is responsible for all of those places. Sickles is responsible for all that loss of life, but also can take responsibility for all that glory and all those legends that were created on July 2nd. So was Sickles wrong? It's tough to say either way. I don't think he was wrong. I certainly sympathize with the man. And whether we like him or not, giving the entire gestalt of the situation, the entire totality of those circumstances there, we can see that Sickles acted with firm logic, with firm understanding of what was happening in his sector of the field. Meade ignored him. Meade ignored him not once, not twice, not 3 times. And when Meade finally called a council of war on July 2nd in the afternoon, and Sickles sent an aide, Meade sent that aide back requesting Sickles personally. Sickles appears to Meade. And as Sickles appears, the Confederate guns rested all on those ridge lines over here, over my right shoulder. The Confederate guns open up. Meade knew it was too late. Meade had not been paying attention to his left flank, but Sickles was. Sickles was paying attention. And Sickles had already moved his troops forward. His troops were stretched thin, but he was ready to meet an attack nonetheless. And as that attack unfolded, the rest was Gettysburg legend and history. As for the rest of Dan Sickles' story in Gettysburg and after, Dan Sickles is very famously going to get wounded in the knee by a cannonball. That leg is going to have to be removed. It's said that Sickles, as he leaves the battlefield, he's putting on this grand display of bravado and machismo, and he is smoking a cigar, calmly cheering his men on as he leaves the battlefield. In the 1890s, Sickles will eventually win a Medal of Honor, but more immediately after the battle is Sickles is going to reach Washington, D.C. before the official reports, before Meade's report of the battle reaches the nation's capital. So Sickles is going to be able to paint himself very much as a hero, no doubt exaggerating his efforts here at Gettysburg. Later on in the 19th century, as the memorialization efforts on the battlefield here really kick into full swing, where a lot of these monuments start popping up and are being dedicated to the different regiments and units here, Sickles is going to find himself embroiled in some controversy. At the Excelsior Monument, there was originally supposed to be a bust of Sickles within that monument. However, the organization designing and building that monument ran out of money. Dan Sickles was at the head of that organization. The exact amount of money that they ran out of, the exact amount of money needed to build the bust of Sickles, is missing from the coffers. Sickles will be accused of embezzling some $23,000 of 1890s money. Not a small sum by today, but if you adjust for inflation, certainly not a small sum by any means. Not only that, but eventually Dan Sickles, he is going to have a sort of a tryst, a lurid affair with the deposed Queen Isabella II of Spain. So even after Gettysburg, Dan Sickles' life has become something that is just the subject of storybooks, the subject of legends. That's why I like to compare him to the 1800s version of Donald Trump. Well guys, thank you so much for joining me. As always, I am your host, Aaron Smith for Forward Gettysburg. I apologize about the wind out here. Still figuring out some of this audio stuff, but I appreciate you guys joining me. I appreciate you fighting through the sound. I'm sure it's going to be terrible on the audio. I'll try to edit some out or something. I don't know. But anyway, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for supporting the channel, guys. I'm at like 1,200 subscribers. That's insane. It's awesome that you guys love learning about the Civil War, the Battle of Gettysburg, and some awesome American history with me. I can't tell you how much I enjoy being here with you. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you on the next one.